I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, every year I do one of these blogs. It's because I get this question asked of me on a monthly basis by at least 6 or 7 people. People will email me. New potential clients will drop me an email and say, "Owen, I'm looking to start working with you maybe sometime this year." And they'll explain to me generally that I'm living in downtown Vancouver, or I'm living in Burnaby or New Westminster. I'm currently renting. So many of these guys now are tech workers. Young tech workers starting to make up a big percentage of my buying clients now. So they tell me, I've been working at X company for the last 18 months. I'm saving my money. I'm making good money. Most of these guys are making well into 6 figures. And I just want to know what the steps are. I'm thinking about buying your book, so that's usually the first thing I'll tell them. Go on to Amazon and pick up my book. It's like a business card for me, and it will give you a fantastic blueprint as your first step. It'll make things seem much more clearer and, again, give you a financial roadmap. But the question is, Owen, what should my steps be? Should I buy a house, buy my principal residence? What about stock investing? I want to buy some stocks. A lot of them will come to me and tell me that, "Oh, I'm renting right now, but I want to buy an investment property." That's my first step that I want to take. So let me go through, and I've done a few blogs over the years, but it's been a while since I've done one, on the steps you need to take. I'll call it the roadmap to wealth, or the roadmap to financial success. Now, I haven't plugged my book for a long time, but I'm going to. So here we go. Along for the ride. This has been on Amazon now for coming up to 2 years. It still sells, I don't know, I don't really keep close tabs on it, but 150, 200 copies every single month. Thank you for everyone who has purchased my book and reviewed it on Amazon or written me a nice note. I tell you, it'll be the best $10 you spent. I didn't write this book as a moneymaker. I meant it as a door opener, a business card to me and my business, and how I achieved financial success at a relatively young age. So again, unlike some bloggers out there, I talk the talk and walk the walk. This is all stuff, it's tangible stuff. It's not theory. This is how I became a multimillionaire at a fairly young age, and how, if I chose to, I could comfortably retire and just live off the passive income flows that my real estate and my stock portfolio generate for me. So this is how I did it. It's all right here in the book, step by step. So I'll give you the summary here. When someone like I just described, a young person, or younger than me, in their 20s or 30s or even 40s, calls me up and says, what are the steps I should take? So the first step, bar none, is to start saving your money for the down payment to move into your own home, a principal residence. Whether that's a townhouse or a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom condo or a 2-bedroom condo. That should be priority number 1. So if you're 28 years old and pulling down 70, 80 grand a year, I would be trying to bank as much money as possible into that savings account, daily interest account, to get the down payment. So to get the down payment, that's the other step. You're going to have to talk to a bank. That's one of the early steps you have to get taken care of once you have, let's say, 60, 70% of your savings put aside. You're not there yet, but let's say in the next year or so, you think you're going to have enough money for the down payment. Next step is to talk to a banker. Go to the bank. I'm happy to refer people to some of my senior mortgage reps at some of the banks that will get you pre-qualified. Or if they can't get you pre-qualified yet, which many of my young clients aren't, they don't have the working history yet. But at least what they'll do is they will give you the roadmap. They will let you know, listen, we need another years of T1s from your employer. You're going to need, if you want to buy a 1-bedroom condo for $675,000 and have Owen represent you, you're going to need 15% down or 10% down based on your current income. They will give you the roadmap you're going to need, and you have to have that. So once you have that, now we know what you need to do. The bank, let's say, tells you, yeah, you want to buy a $700,000 condo, you're going to need, based on your income, over the last couple of years, we're going to want to see a 15% down payment from you. So you're going to need, let's say, $140,000. So that's not easy to do. And again, this is the biggest hurdle for everybody, is saving for that down payment. Once you've got the down payment and you've bought your condo, it's smooth sailing after that. because the cost to hold your mortgage based on today's interest rates, and even if interest rates go up 2 or 3%, is a breeze. It's not much more than what you're paying for rent right now. And yet you're owning it, chipping down the principal, and creating equity with capital gain over time. So once you've got that down payment, that is the biggest hurdle you've got ahead of you. Now, what I would recommend, and everyone's different, I've had clients that have been able to save half of what they earn. So if they're netting $100,000 a year, they've been able to set aside $50,000 a year to that down payment fund. Not everyone works that way. Some people have got young kids. They've got other obligations. They're not making $100,000 or $150,000 a year. It all depends on the individual. When I was saving for down payments, when I was in my accumulating years and working and whatnot, I was generally able to save 20-25% of my income pretty comfortably. But everybody's different, whatever it takes. But of course, the more you save, the quicker you're going to get that down payment, the quicker you're going to be able to buy that house. Now, principal residence is always goal number one. And I've done so many blogs on it. It's not going to cost you much more to hold a principal residence as opposed to renting. Renting in a city like Vancouver or Los Angeles or Toronto or London or Miami or San Francisco or San Diego, I can name off 60 cities here, is a rough business to be in, being a long-term renter, when you're paying $2,200 or $2,300 a month. You're making your landlord, you're making a guy like me wealthy. Get off that renter's treadmill. Now, there's nothing wrong with renting in the short term, as I've often said, 1, 2, 3 years, however long it takes to save for that down payment. Or I also advise people that if you're not sure if you're going to stay in Vancouver and you're not going to commit to at least an 8 to 10 year holding period, then stay renting. Probably best just to stay renting until you can at least hold the property for 8 to 10 years. But remember, buying real estate should always be looked at as a long-term commitment. You know, a roof over your head and shelter is a lifetime need. You're going to always need a home until you die or until they move you into an old folks home. So real estate for your principal residence should be nothing but long-term. And it amazes me sometimes people are so caught up in what the market will do this year, next year, the year after, and I'm going to wait for a better opportunity. Who cares? Why would it matter to you? In the meantime, you're throwing away $2,200 a month in rent. Think of your principal residence as shelter first. And the longer you keep it, and when you're ready to retire or move into that old folks home and sell it, you're going to make a tremendous amount of capital gain on it. Double or triple what you originally paid for it, guaranteed. Even as an investment property, if you're buying it and putting a tenant in it, again, look at it as a long-term commitment and nothing but. I don't really work with flippers and speculators, especially not these days with this market. But buy it, put a tenant in it, keep it for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Then take a look at it after your tenant's paid down your mortgage and it's free title. Then, if you want to sell it for $2 million, half of which will be capital gains, favorable tax situation, having capital gains as opposed to working income, then you might want to sell it. But real estate, remember too, which I've blooded so many times here, real estate is not the type of investment that is meant to be traded or thought about short term, because it's incredibly expensive to buy and sell. When you buy real estate in Vancouver, you've got PTT, which is a killer. You've got your notary and lawyer's fees. You might have GST if it's brand new. When it comes time to sell it, you're going to have to hire me, and I'm going to charge you $20,000 or $25,000 to sell the property. Then you're going to have capital gains. The original, what I call the original speculator's tax. We've always had a speculator tax. It's called capital gains tax, even though the NDP would tell you otherwise. That's what the capital gains tax is. It's a speculator tax. And I'm fine to pay it because it's only 50% of the gain. It's great. I went off track there a bit, but buy it and hold it. But principal residence should be step number one. Step number two, after you've got the money, that should be your number one priority again. You should almost be, if you're living in Vancouver, earning a good salary right now, you like the city, and who wouldn't? This is one of the best cities in the world to live in, bar none. You should be almost possessed to save that $100 or $125 or $130,000. I would be doing everything. And I did. I've been there and done it. I worked 12, 13, 14-hour days, and then I'd work more on weekends. I did whatever it took to get that $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to buy my first property. And then I rinsed and repeated it for the next 30 years and continued to save to buy additional investment properties. But it starts with your principal residence. The other thing, of course, is with your principal residence, it's the only true tax shelter we get. There is no limits on what you can shelter in your principal residence. So if you buy a $1 million Yaletown condo today, 25 years from now, you sell it for $3 million, that full $3 million comes to you completely tax-free. Do the math, run the math, have a look at what capital gains tax eats away, or even worse, have a look at what you're paying on your marginal tax rate, interest income or working income. Half of what I often complain, real world problems for me, but half of what I earn goes to Revenue Canada for my working income. Second step, after you bought your principal residence, get a handle on your RRSPs and your TFSA. Now, if you bought my book, all this stuff is spelled out in here in much greater detail. But the thing with an RRSP, let's say for every dollar you're saving before you bought your house, you might want to allocate a little bit of that money into your RRSP, especially if you're earning 60, 70, 80,000 or above. You're getting into a little bit higher tax rates then. Not huge, but you're at least starting to creep up into the higher echelons there with the last $10,000 or $20,000. So you might want to, for every dollar you save, earmark 80 cents of that to the down payment for your principal residence and put 20 cents away of every dollar into the RRSP. Nice thing with the RRSP, of course, is you get the tax deduction. All the money grows tax sheltered. Of course, though, you do get hit with it when you pull it out. That's the thing with an RRSP some people often forget. Once you decide to start drawing down that RRSP, it's taxable at your full marginal rate. Unlike the principal residence, which it all comes out tax-free. Next thing would be a TFSA. You want to try and, once you've bought your principal residence, try and, if you can, max out both the RRSP and the TFSA. If your income is under 55, 60K, I would go towards the TFSA before I would be maxing out the RRSP. And I explain it in my book, the reasonings behind that. You don't get the tax deduction with the TFSA, but that money does grow tax sheltered. And when you do pull it out, it all comes out tax-free, unlike the RRSP. The problem is you're only limited to $6,000 now. It was $5,500. It's not a whole lot of money you can put into a TFSA. The other thing with an RRSP is you can make up the room later on. It's always there for you. It's the same thing with the TFSA though as well. That's why I always say max out your down payment savings first. Get into that home, into that principal residence. You can always make up the unused room on your RRSP and your TFSA later on. After that, after you've got you've bought your principal residence, you've got your TFSA maxed out, you're pumping money into your RRSP, getting that tax deduction and growing that. And in my book, I talk about what you want to be putting into your RRSP and your TFSAs, the type of equities, the type of stocks you want to be putting in there. Canadian and US equities. Blue chip dividend paying stocks is the way to go. I give you the full roadmap and I give you a outline of my holdings in here. I reveal it all in my book, the exact holdings. You could also go onto the Globe and Mail. They did they've done several articles on me in the past on my investment holdings, and I reveal my portfolio to everyone there. Nothing magical. It's just all good blue chip dividend paying stocks. Once that's taken care of, the third and final step then, if you can, would be to buy an investment property. That's the last step, not the first step, not the second step. It's the third step. Save up your money. I recommend you buy a piece of downtown Vancouver while the getting is still good. The window is closing. Some people don't want to believe it, but 15, 20 years from now, it will be unattainable for all but the wealthy. That's just the way it is. Look at a city like New York City, Manhattan. Buying pretty much anything in there now, condo, other than co-ops, is very expensive. You're looking at $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million for a small one-bedroom apartment, and you've got $1,800 to $2,000 a month in common charges. Property taxes, maintenance fees, extremely expensive. Buy yourself a simple one-bedroom condo, put a tenant in it, let the tenant do all the heavy lifting for you, and for God's sake, try and hang on to it as long as you can. Don't play the game where you buy it 3 years from now, you've made a quick $50,000 and you get tempted to sell it. Play the full 9 innings of baseball, which is what I've always told people, and it will reward you fantastically. It's a long-term playbook here. That's why I call it along for the ride. This isn't getting rich careful or getting rich quickly. It's a slow, methodical way, but it's the guaranteed way to get wealthy. The final thing I'll say, and what my book is all about, and why you want to be getting into RRSPs and TFSAs and buying an investment property. You want to be buying these equities that pay you a dividend. Your real estate, your tenant is going to pay you a monthly rent check. It's all about passive income. This is something that I was fortunate enough to learn 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. When I first started really getting into stock investing, I had already been into buying real estate. I bought my first investment property 33 years ago. Still own it today, as people know. But it's all about passive income. There are not enough working hours in the day, as we all know, to work for a paycheck. You have to take some of that money, put it into assets that will not only appreciate, like real estate or stock, but one step better, they'll pay you to hold them. If it's a stock, they're going to send you a check 4 times a year, a quarterly dividend. If it's a rental property, that tenant's going to pay you every month, send you a rent check. Collect those cash flows, collect those dividends, set them aside. When you get enough money in there, redeploy it to more of that asset or more real estate. It's just a rinse and repeat process. I spell all this out in my book. I think most people will agree that have bought my book. Maybe you can give me a comment here. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy playbook to understand. It's nothing fancy here. I'm not a fancy guy. I'm just a meat and potatoes. Let's do it methodically and the guaranteed way. I don't want to take a lot of risks. But the secret is to get your money working for you. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that I post lots of articles on creating wealth, the philosophies behind successful business people and investors and hedge fund managers and private equity managers. And it's keeping it simple, not getting fancy, buying good quality assets, whether that's real estate or equities, and just keeping them and collecting the cash flows. That's all there is to it. But the common trait that all successful people have, multimillionaires, including myself, I'll put myself in that category, is that they all have multiple revenue streams. And I posted quite a few articles on my Twitter account over the last year on this. They have their working income, which is great. Don't quit your day job. I would never quit my day job. I love what I do, and it produces a nice income for me. But I've got my real estate portfolio. I've got my stock portfolio. Not a week goes by when I'm not getting 2 or 3 dividend checks. When you own as many companies as I own in my portfolio, every week you're getting a dividend check. And then I've got other small ventures. I make a little bit of money from my book. I make money from my YouTube advertising. You should do the same thing. Stick with a good high-paying career. Try and work your way up the ladder and earn more money every year. Get better at your career. Get better at your job. But at the same time, start taking some of that money and getting it into assets that will pay you to hold them. And now you're really cooking. If you can start when you're in your 20s or early 30s, by the time you get into your mid-40s, you're going to start to see results. Life is going to start to look pretty good for you when you've got $30 or $40 or $50,000 a year coming in on top of your regular working income. When you get into my age in the early 50s, now life gets really sweet. Now you don't have to get up to work if you don't want to. If you want to take a month off and travel through Europe, you can do it. You've still got money coming in from your real estate and your stock portfolio. So this is the way I did it. It's all in my book, but I learned this from the best. This is nothing fancy. It's nothing exclusive to me. It's just a real simple blueprint on how to achieve wealth and financial security. And you can set the goal as high or as low as you want. It doesn't mean my book here, I've talked about it in several chapters about how money is not everything. Money doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Material possessions mean very little to me. I'm a minimalist and have been for a long time. What money and creating passive income will do for you, though, the magic it'll do is it'll buy you time. That's what happiness will bring you happiness, is time. Where instead of having to work at a job, and a lot of people work at careers, it's tough. I would try and get into a career or a job that you enjoy doing. I don't know anything else. But it'll buy you time where you don't have to work for an employer, and you can spend time with your family or playing guitar or traveling or doing things that you want. That's what money will do for you. And that's what I teach you in my book here. I'm Owen Bigland. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.